Hello and welcome to this Core Animator introduction tutorial. This is the design side. We're going to be looking at Core Animator, looking at all of its features, just the tools, keyboard shortcuts, tips and tricks, just kind of a general overview, get oriented with Core Animator and some of the things it can do and some of the best practices for doing that. To do so, let's go ahead and open up this Core Animator trash project. We're going to be creating this project. We have two elements, a lid and a trash can PNG image, and we're going to be creating two animations, one where we open it, kind of just grows and opens the lid, and then other animation where it starts at that same position and then closes the lid. So a very simple project to get started with, but it'll help us get oriented with the basics. Before we start, we have two PNG files here. You see we have the trash can and then the trash lid, and they are named with the @2x.png suffix. And that's kind of the preferred way to work with Core Animator, is to just drag in the @2x images, and then Core Animator will actually automatically create the @1x and manage that for you. There's other ways to work with it, but that's how we're gonna start. So let's go ahead and open a new new project in Core Animator and talk a little bit about what's going on. In the center we have a canvas area defined, and up here we have some zoom controls, so we can press center and then we'll be able to see the whole canvas. It kind of picks a default size. These may or may not be in the build you're looking at, these presets, but they kind of give you just a general idea of point sizes. And I want to talk a little bit about point sizes versus pixel sizes. Some designers may not be familiar with. If you're an iOS developer, you certainly are already familiar with this. So you'll notice the canvas is in points, not pixels. And we have on our website, this is just a screenshot from our website, under the documentation, a little overview of what to expect with canvas size, some common point sizes that will scale up. And if you're not familiar with point versus pixel, I would just go ahead and look at that really quickly and familiarize yourself with how that works. On the left side we have an elements panel and an animations panel. On the right side we have this dynamic properties panel, which shows the canvas right now, because that's the only thing that can be selected. There are no elements. The top bar we have on this left side, we have some tools that help sort the elements forward, backward, put them into groups or ungroup them. And we also have an export module, which will show up and will show us a preview of all of our animations, how it's going to export. In the middle section we have the play button to preview animations. We have a selection tool, a direct selection tool, a hand to move around, and a group effects tool. Probably won't be talking about that. We'll save that for another tutorial. We already talked about the zoom tools, and you can hide the panels here. You'll notice we cannot see the bottom panel until we actually create an animation. Then that bottom panel will pop up, and that is the timeline. So let's go back to setup. So there are two modes basically that Core Animator works in. Setup works as kind of the initial global state of all of your elements, and then the animations will change over time. So at first let's start in the setup, and let's drag in our two elements we're going to be working with. You'll notice that Core Animator just uses the file name. It doesn't use the @2x because obviously that's just for your convenience. You can see over here in the image source, you can see, so now we have elements. If we click on them, the properties panel will show up with that element highlighted and its properties displayed. you'll notice under image source, if I click on that, you can see the lid and the trash can, and they both have a 2 by them, meaning that there is an @2x version and an @1x version being managed by Core Animator. So we don't have to worry about that. That's why that's the preferred method of working in Core Animator, is to just only drag in the @2x images. So let's go ahead and start just clicking and dragging these around. The canvas size for this project, I'm not sure that we'll be using it, so we'll just kind of define it about the size of the whole UI element. So just clicking and dragging with the normal cursor, we can move these objects around. I want to get those in place before I group them together, and there's a reason for that. So let's say that I just know, okay, I want the trash can and the trash lid, so I'm going to select those both, and I want those to be in a group. Now that will, the initial moment you make a group, it will take those positions and create the group, and that will always be the case. So now if I want to move the trash lid down closer, my overarching group is always going to have this original bounding box. So I don't really want that. I'm going to go ahead and ungroup it and get those closer together where I want them to be before I actually group them. Now we can zoom in. You can use Command plus, or you can use these up here, Command plus and minus, or Command 0 to center it. You can hold the space bar for a temporary hand tool, or you can, if you have a magic mouse, you can probably just scroll around just fine. Okay, so now I've got these closer to where I want. I can use the arrow keys to nudge the position. And if I use just an arrow key, it will nudge 1 pixel. If I can hold shift, and I can move 10 pixels at a time with the arrow keys. So I'm going to get it about where I want it to be. And you'll notice that it also has an anchor point. As I hover over the anchor point, I get this cursor, and I can move the anchor point wherever I need to go. So I'm going to move it there because I'm going to be rotating from there. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to select both of them, and I'm going to hit group. You can hit Command G or use the button. And now you'll notice that that initial bounding box is more like what I want. And I'm going to name the group. I'm just going to double click on that and call it trash can. That's really it for this project. With the more complex project, we'll have a lot of elements to manage and to group and to put anchor points at. And but this is a really simple start. So I think that's all we need. We have a trash can group, and we have the lid with the anchor point correctly defined, and we are good to go. Okay, so let's go ahead and make our first animation. We've already made a blank one here called Untitled Animation. I'll right click, and I'm going to delete that so we remember how we make the new animation. Is this, just press this plus button right here. It'll automatically ask you to name it. So I'm going to name the first one Open. And you'll notice that the timeline shows up, and we have a time in seconds. We have this red cursor is where the playhead actually is. The blue cursor is kind of a quick preview skim bar, and that we'll see that show up. You can use the slider here to get more zoomed in on the timeline or zoom out. You can also use Command plus and minus. As long as your cursor is down here, it will do the same thing as the slider. So let's put our playhead out to 1/2 a second, and let's animate the trash can opening. So I'm going to highlight the trash lid, and any modification I make over time will show up in my timeline as an animation. So I can directly manipulate those with these handles. So you can see I get this rotation icon as I get near the edge. I get a scale icon here, and I just have a move icon if I want to move it around. So I'll get the rotation, I'll click and I'll drag, and I'll open the trash can, and you'll notice that it automatically shows that element that has a property of rotation and is opening to a value of -120 degrees rotation. And I can use the skim bar to see that change over time. You'll notice that at 0 there's not a keyframe. It's actually reaching back into beyond 0, which would be technically the setup point. And that'll become more important later on, but you can change the value at 0 if you want, and that may be what you want to do. But in this case, our setup value is where we want to start from, and this will work just great. So as that happens, let's maybe make this a little more interesting and make the entire trash can grow at the same time. So now I'm going to be manipulating the scale. There's a couple of things you can do. You can directly manipulate it using this, and you'll see that will start to show up. If I hold Shift, then I will lock those values together, and I can also hold Alt, which will make it scale out from the center. Or I'm going to hit Command Z Command Z to undo that change. I can also hit the link button here, and I can use these scrubby sliders that appear over the value, and you'll see that I only get the scale showing up for the entire trash can group. So now as I skim, I'll see it open and grow. It doesn't grow very much. Maybe I want it to grow just a bit more. So I'm going to up that value just a little bit more. So that looks pretty nice. Now we have these tween lines between the values changing. You can click on those and change the easing style. So right now this will define what the next, when you define the next keyframe, what that tween line easing style will be. You can change what the next one will be, and you can also just change it after the fact. So let's say this trash lid is kind of, it's just linear right now. Let's say we want it to kind of anticipate the movement and maybe overshoot the movement a little bit. So this will go, actually, it'll start rotating the wrong way, and then it will go up to beyond the point where we want to get to, and then it will come back a little bit. And it's kind of a subtle. So you see that starting to go the wrong way, then it does go beyond the point where you have defined, and then it comes back. So it just kind of gives a little more organic anticipation, overshoot. You could even do that as well to the scale if you want it to kind of go along with that. Anyway, that's pretty much it, all there is to that animation. And the easiest way to go about making the next animation, we want to start from this position, and we want to close the trash can. So the easiest way to do that is probably to come over into the animations, right click on the open, and select duplicate. I'm going to double click on this, and I'm going to rename it to close. And now I have the same exact animation. I actually want this state at half a second to be the beginning state. So I'm going to select all my keyframes and drag them over to 0. And so now I have the initial state matched up with the end state of the open animation. And let's say I want it to close a bit faster than it opened. I'm going to select the trash lid. I could directly, put that down to 0, or I could come over here, enter in the value for 0. Maybe I want it to just overshoot a little bit, so you kind of get a little slam down on the lid reaction. And then maybe I want the overall trash can to shrink back down to 100%, and it will take just a little bit longer. So I'll enter in 100%. Since it's linked, it will apply to both. And maybe I'll just leave that one linear. So you can see that I can click and drag, or I can just use the skim bar to preview that. I can also press enter, and it will start playing in real time. Or you can hit this play button. If you don't like the skim bar, you can turn that off. That's a view option over here. So now that's pretty much all there is to this project. We've imported our elements with the @2x suffix. We know that Core Animator is managing those, so that it automatically created an @1x suffix, and it has both of those available to the developer as they deploy this. We set up our anchor points in the setup mode, and we define the initial global state of all the elements in setup mode. Then we created some animations and moved the playhead over time, changed properties over time, and those automatically get keyed. We talked about easing styles, and that's basically it for now. We'll go up here to the export module, and you'll see that the developer will have some options in here that we'll familiarize ourselves with in the developer tutorial, but we can preview the project here. We get the open animation and the close animation, and that's basically all we need for this project. So thanks for watching. We'll go in more depth into some of the other techniques. We'll talk about the group effects tool in a later tutorial. We'll talk about animating Z position, talk about animating image sources, and some of the more interesting things in later tutorials. But this is just going over the basics, and that's it.